the problem we confront ourselves with is that there has never yet really been a genuinely equal democracy, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and also genuinely equal.
I think, Chris, one of the things that draws me to South Africa as a country and as a case for thinking about democracy's survival, but also democracy death, is actually how successful it has been, right? So many people in 1994 were deeply concerned about the prospects of civil war, of revolt or revolution from either the white or the Black population. And while we're going to talk a lot today about the challenges that South Africa has faced, we have not seen democratic collapse, right?
Can we start with just a couple paragraphs about the history of South Africa, how it was colonized, how it was kind of built on two Western cultures, Dutch and British. Anyway, I mean, you're the expert. So, just to give people kind of a background about apartheid and what happened 30 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, so the history of South Africa is a long and complicated history, but it's worth noting that it's an area that's very culturally diverse, ethnically diverse. It's very rich in natural minerals, in diamonds, in oil. And the story of South Africa, at least when it comes to understanding apartheid, really begins with the colonization of the area by Dutch immigrants. They took over the land from a number of indigenous tribes that had been in the area since the dawn of human history. The British eventually became economically interested in the area and fought a civil war with the Dutch and won. So there's both British and Dutch influence, colonial influence in the area. But it wasn't until kind of after that conflict had ended that the government really started to think about how best, or the colonial government started to think about how best to rule over an overwhelmingly large minority Black and colored population. I just want to kind of flag for listeners that when we use the terms white, Black, and colored on the podcast today, those are the political terms that are used in South Africa today.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kind of politically correct ways to be referencing those racial categories that were designed under apartheid. So the political system that the government came up with in order to kind of keep control over this large African indigenous population was a system of apartheid. And that was the separation of white, Black, and colored South Africans from each other. It involved the creation of townships, of segregated education, of segregated jobs, and really concentrated the power, both economically and politically, within the whites in the country. It was a deal that was struck between the British and the Dutch in order to, or what had ended up becoming the Afrikaner population, between the British and the Afrikaners, to really maintain control over the country. Apartheid lasted for decades, and it wasn't until 1994 that we saw the overthrow of that regime. After a white referendum 2 years before that encouraged the current apartheid government to negotiate with the then very strong opposition party, the ANC, led by Nelson Mandela.
It's worth saying that South Africa, no one gives up power willingly or, with equanimity. They really had no choice. And, part of that was, the domestic leadership of people like Mandela and Stephen Biko and a variety of other, African leaders, but it was also an international pressure, right? I mean, when I was in college, there was, big talk and actions, campus action about divesting from South Africa. There were, lots of, protest songs about Ain't Gonna Play Sin City, which was plays in South Africa, and there's Peter Gabriel had a song about Biko, and then the other thing is that the Cold War ended, so the claim of the South African white government that they were a beachhead against communism became less tenable. And anyway, as a result of all this, the white government basically gave up. That the ANC was made African National Congress, which was the African party in South Africa, was made legal. Nelson Mandela was released from prison after 27 years, I think. It's something just a ridiculous amount of time, and then that led to 1994, and the first election where everybody had a vote.
So I think, we talk about South African democracy and, we talk about 2 days or 3 days of voting and really long lines. But I think it's worth remembering that the process of democratization in South Africa took many years, right? So we can start at 1990, for example, when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and really began aggressively negotiating but on behalf of the ANC with the apartheid government about what a potential democratic transition would look like. We can go back decades before then when we think about the struggle of activists like Ankie Krog, who were advocating for kind of human rights representation and equality way earlier on. There are so many kind of heroes and inspirational people who were involved in the process. But one of the components of this negotiation that took place between 1990 and 1994 was wrestling with exactly these questions, Chris, which is how does a country that has been so divided and so ignorant of each other for so long kind of come together to form a democracy in which you need to find common good and common ground and a greater understanding of people. One of the ideas that was then put forward was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the idea behind the commission was that people were going to come forward all over the country from all different backgrounds and talk about the experiences that they had had with apartheid.